You're muted.
I'm muted. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you also hear me? Am I clear?
Okay. Nice to see you. So, would you want to try your slides now, or you
Yeah,
think
I
it's good?
think so. Yes,
You
yeah,
would
very
want to
important. I
try?
think I should try.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So
yes.
go ahead and share.
Okay. So can you see my slide?
Yes, it's looking good.
Okay.
Yes, it's
I
very
just
clear.
want to
Okay. So you can
okay.
take it down. Yeah, it's looking very good. Thank you.
It's okay. And my voice, how's my voice?
Yeah, it's loud enough.
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so we are at the top of the hour, and we'd like to say welcome everyone who is joining. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining from on the surface of this earth. We'd like to welcome you to the March 2025 webinar series from the Center for Translation and Implementation Research, right out of the College of Medicine of the University of Nigeria. And today we have a very important topic to discuss, and we have a very important and marvelous speaker with us. And just before I make my introductions of him, I'd like to talk to us about some things that we'll be looking out for today as we speak with him. So at this point, I'm sharing my screen, and I'm believing that you're seeing my screen, because what we're talking about today, we all know the topic is on research integrity. And a lot of people have been asking me, we saw the flyer, we saw two faces. What's the other face doing there? That's the face you're seeing. That's the face of the Joker. The Joker is a fictional character. The Joker also was something that started out as a cartoon character, but pervades a lot of our movies in the modern day. And the Joker is synonymous with manipulation, deceit, anarchy, deception. Just the same way that we know that research misconduct in any form, be it data fabrication or falsification or plagiarism, undermines the integrity of any scientific research. So that's what the Joker is, just like research on integrity that is undermined. And then just as the Joker is able to challenge societal norms, his face looks very friendly and smiley, but behind that mask is deceit and deception. Violations of research integrity also erode the trust that people will have in the academia. It will erode the trust that funders will have in scientists, just because their findings are falsified or fabricated. And so today, to speak to us about research integrity, its importance, and everything we need to know, is someone who is at the forefront of the battle to ensure that research integrity is entrenched in our systems, in the universities and in academia globally. And I would like, without much ado, to introduce our speaker for today. He's Dr. Chidozie Godian Ike. He's a physician, a community health physician at Irua Specialist Hospital at Edo State. He's also a lecturer at the College of Medicine, Ambrose Ali University, also in Edo State in Nigeria. He graduated from Ebonyi State University and has two master's degrees, one from the University of Benin and the other in clinical trials from the University of London. He is an expert in infectious diseases, bioethics, and research integrity, and he's a certified research ethics professional. He's also the winner of the prestigious 2024 Anderson Kleinert Award for Promoting Research Integrity, and he's the pioneer head of the Office of Research Integrity at Irua Specialist Teaching Hospital. He's very popular for a lot of his innovative approaches to research integrity, especially among undergraduate students in our universities. And of course, he is the creator of the very popular game Ring, which is the Research Integrity National Game. So without much ado, I'd like to welcome Dr. Ike to speak to us today and to let us know what we need to know about research integrity. Welcome, sir, and you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Sonia, and thank everyone for coming for this webinar. I know people are coming from different parts of the world. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, but I won't say good night. So with these few minutes we're going to share together, we're going to share my perspective on research integrity. We're looking at the basic concepts, and some of the things I'm going to say, I believe, inspire us to promote trustworthy science. So I would like to share my slide. So can we see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Okay.
Waiting for it to be on. Okay, yes, great.
So for a few declarations, because you are talking about research integrity, so a few declarations. I serve as a member of local and international networks, and I'm affiliated to some research institutions that might be interested in this webinar. But however, I do not have any conflict of interest. So we'll be talking about conflict of interest. So more so, the opinion I am going to express here are mine, except where copyright information are used. For example, I got some of the slides with permission from the Committee of Publication Ethics to share some of their slides as long as I do not alter the slides. So what do we intend to gain from this webinar? One, I will be happy that after the webinar, everyone present here should be familiar with the basic research integrity and misconduct concepts. It is possible that we've been hearing about research integrity and maybe research ethics. So at the end of this webinar, we should go home with the fact that we are now familiar with the concepts. Again, that we should be able to appreciate the situations that promote research misconduct and how to prevent or avoid them. The participants here should know how to promote research integrity, especially like Tony has said, among young people. So you may want to ask me at the end of the presentation, why am I passionate about young people? Then we look at different approaches and then how to harmonize them. So, but before that, we need to launch the poll questions. I would like to know my audience. So please, could we launch the poll questions?
Okay, yes, sir. We are launching the poll questions. So yes, the poll questions are launched. So go ahead and explain.
So please, kindly or tick the best option, a single choice option, or check the boxes where you're coming from. Please, could you um, uh, attend to the poll questions? Everyone, please.
So we have a total of about 17 questions, and they're very easy, single option only, and you just tick and scroll down and complete it. Thank you.
So please, once the poll questions are addressed or answered, please let me know so that because we have so much to cover this afternoon. So you need to tell us where you're coming from, even if you're not residing in that location, and describe your research career level. You need to tell us whether you're a student or researcher. What best describes you? Are you a student? Maybe you are a researcher and a student, but what best describes you? So please let us know. And regarding this webinar, how familiar are you with the topic? Have you committed a research misconduct in the past? It's anonymous, so feel free to say yes, no, or you don't want to disclose it, but nobody will identify respondents. So feel free to let us know whether you have seen a situation that you think is research misconduct. Maybe it could be from a colleague or maybe from you. Are you aware how research misconduct can be managed in your institution? Do you know how to manage research misconduct? Does your institution have a policy on research misconduct? I will encourage you to be very fast because we have a lot to cover and I wouldn't want to be too fast. So please just um, check the boxes, Thank you for those who are responding. So many of you are from Africa. And majority of you are researchers and they're health workers. So I'm happy. So many of you are familiar with the topic and some not so familiar. And I think you know someone who has been involved in research misconduct. And some of you have had a conflict of interest. It is common, but it's not often discussed. Just have a minute or two to go. Yes, many of you are aware of how to manage research misconduct. Wow, that's good. Your institution has a policy on research misconduct and it's integrated in your university curriculum. You have an office, research integrity, that's great. And it's available on your website. Majority of you have a classroom exposure to research integrity. And you're here because you want to apply the knowledge to your research practice. So, Professor Tonya, would you like to show us the poll results? Because of time is past away. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So we can stop the polling here, you think? We have approximately half. Can we give just 2 minutes more? Then
It's
we
okay.
can
Okay.
stop the,
It's
yes.
okay. All right.
Yes, so we have 2 more minutes. Okay, we have a minute to go. We have 1 minute to go. Just 1 minute to go. And
Are
then
we
we'll
recording the
end.
presentation? Are we recording the presentation? Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Okay.
So majority of you have a classroom
All right.
exposure.
Yes.
Okay.
So I think we can now end the poll here. So we're ending the poll here. Okay. So would you like me to share the results of that poll?
Yeah, please do.
Now or at the end? Let's do
It's
it at the
okay.
end.
At the end, it's okay. It's all right.
Okay. All right. So you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So, why are we here this afternoon? Why is research integrity important? Like the Joker, why should we avoid research misconduct? Why should you run away when you see a situation that may lead you to research misconduct? But what are those situations? Why do people commit fraud? Some scientists, maybe because of pressure, fame, publish or perish, reputation, peer pressure, competition, or other rewards. So that is why it's important for us to consider this. But because some of you are joining this uh, webinar for the first time, or maybe this is your first time you are listening to a lecture on research integrity. So maybe a few definitions may be necessary, but I'm not going to spend much time here. So I'm going to use the European Code of Conduct for Research Integrity to define what research integrity is. Research integrity is reliability in ensuring the quality of research reflected in design, the methods, the analysis, and the use of resources. Now, I'm taking it at the basic level. What is reliability? Is the consistency of a measure of a method. It is trustworthy and stable. The results are when the study is repeated under similar conditions over time. Another definition of research integrity is honesty in developing, undertaking, reviewing, and reporting and communicating research in a transparent, fair, full, and unbiased way. Now, what is honesty? Now, I take the third definition of honest, and I know you like it. It implies a refusal to lie, steal, or deceive in any way. To lie, to steal, or deceive in any way. How about transparency? Transparency is the characteristics of being easy to see through. Some of the initiatives we have globally, like the open science, is based on the principle of transparency. It's also the quality of being done in an open way without secret. Open science, open technology, open infrastructure, open collaboration, the way you conduct your study, what you use, and all the information, like using AI to do some of your studies. Now you need to tell us everything about the AI that you used. That's from the principle of transparency. It's also the respect of colleagues, research participants, society, like taxpayers, ecosystem, cultural heritage, and environment. It's also the accountability of from the research idea to publication. We have other definitions from the Office of Research Integrity. We could see the same thing over and over again: honesty, accuracy, fairness, collegiality. NIH defines research integrity as the use of honest and verifiable methods. It could also be defined as adherence to rules, regulations, and guidelines. So we designed a virtue clock, or what we call professional or integrity clock, that has all the professional values around the clock. The essence of this is an aid memo to strengthen the behavior of scientists, or promotes the behavior of scientists towards exhibiting positive behavior around the clock wherever they are in the world. You could use the research integrity synonymous, it could be synonymous with responsible conduct of research, because it's still based on the use of the practice of professional norms and ethical principles. So now you have known what research integrity is. Let's take you to what research misconduct is. And I know that some of you are interested in looking at research misconduct, we spend more of our time here. First, what is research misconduct? It's important for us to know this. Now, we have the main ones, but not frequent ones, but the main ones are the FFP, fabrication, falsification, or plagiarism in proposing, performing, or reviewing research, or in reporting research results. Now, before you could say that something is research misconduct, it means a significant departure from accepted practice. It also means committing fraud intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly. The other one is that it must be proven by a preponderance of evidence. Now, let's take them one by one. What is fabrication? It's making up of data or results and recording or reporting them. How about falsification? Falsification is manipulating research materials, equipment, or processes, or changing or omitting data, maybe manipulating results or manipulating your images, which you use from the laboratory results. Then plagiarism is the appropriation of another person's ideas, processes, results, or words without giving appropriate credit. But you should know that honest errors or differences of opinions do not constitute research misconduct. We have some more frequent ones. But many people don't know about them. One is sloppy science, questionable research practices, failing to report all dependent measures that are relevant for a finding, insufficient or irresponsible supervision of junior co-workers, selective citations, and publishing only positive results. We have other behaviors that could result to research misconduct, especially fraudulent authorship. We have ghost authorship. I'm fond of ghost authorship because this kind of authorship behavior or misbehavior is frequent or common among students and young PhDs and very senior colleagues, where someone appears and the person was not part of the study from the beginning, and you see the name in the publication. And we have you that have been there, performed statistical analysis, you have been part of the study from the beginning, and during the publications, your name is not there. We have other authorship issues, but I will not bug you with them. We'll have the presentation at the end of this, you will have the recordings. Now, what promotes research misconduct? Lack or inadequate awareness. That's why we are creating the awareness in this March webinar. Then absence of an ORI. If your institution doesn't have from the pool, some of you say you have the Office of Research Integrity. So if you don't have the office, it is very likely that you will find it difficult to manage misconduct. When there is absence or weak regulatory infrastructure, or when you don't have any example at your institutions, nobody to say, oh, this is a good researcher, this professor does his work or her work well. When everybody does the same thing, manipulates, fabricates, plagiarizes, no role model in the environment at your institution, it is difficult to practice research integrity. When the environment is toxic, when the equipment is not there, no possible equipment, like some institutions during accreditation, that's when they borrow equipment from one institution to their institution just to get accreditation. These things promote research misconduct and then usual public or parish practices. But now, when you have gone through these basics, you want to become a role model. You want to become someone that practices research integrity. How do you do that? You do that by teaching. We teach you. You listen to folklore, good stories about good role models, and then you become a role model yourself. And then we have this environment that is good supervision, good equipment, good environment, good mentorship, good supervision. Then you promote professional values. That's how we can foster research integrity. Now, part 2 of this presentation is conflict of interest. That's the part 2 of it. And I think it's important. Many people don't talk about conflict of interest because it's very sensitive and it makes people angry, especially those who are conflicted. So why are people conflicted? When you talk about conflict, that you already are interested in the primary aim of the research, integrity of the research, and the protection of participants in research. But the next thing is that maybe something financial or non-financial clouds your mind and then somehow affects your primary interest. That's conflict of interest. Now we have some definitions. I'll use one definition here. A set of conditions in which an investigator's judgment concerning a primary interest, for example, the integrity of the research, the welfare of the research participants, being biased by secondary financial or non-financial interest. Now you could have financial interest, like you are interested in salaries. So many researchers are interested in salaries. I'm not saying it's wrong. Salaries are good, but you're interested. So I'm just interested that that fund, that grant is going to give me R1 grant, R24 grant, R25 grant, or whatever grant is tune of 5 billion US dollars. And that's what I'm looking at. You're already conflicted. And then some of you are interested in royalties, stocks, or shares. We have non-financial conflict. When you are a speaker, you have consultations, you're expert witness, you have a relation in an organization that is manufacturing the drug. Then there are other conflicts that are not just research conflicts. There are intellectual conflicts. When you believe that the world is a straight line, when you have a very strong opinion because of your specialty, and then you don't want even your research to dispute or conflict with your opinion, or when you have a strong moral convictions, that could also be part of intellectual conflict. We have another conflict that happens among senior and junior colleagues, like among those who are doing PhDs. We have a supervisor that is having so many responsibilities outside the PhD supervision. We have staff of hospitals, universities, industries, institutes that have several engagements that affect their primary engagement. That is conflict of commitment. You can see them more commonly amongst postdocs, PhDs, and even undergraduates. When you have a supervisor that is not even around to supervise your project work, you have those ones, those who have conflict of commitment. Then we have conflict of conscience. We have those that is commonly among those who submit protocols to the ethics committees. A study has been conducted, a protocol has been used to conduct a study. Then your supervisor tells you, or your faculty dean tells you to carry the protocol to submit again to another ethics committee, or to prove that you have not conducted a study, but your conscience tells you that this study has been conducted. That's a conflict of conscience. So we have several reasons why people are going in having conflict. The funding is there. There's competition. There are what we call contract research organizations. People are competing for clinical trials, for big studies. Institutions want to be ranked, and there's big money somewhere. That's why the temptation is very strong. And when you see the funding call, it said 1.32 billion euros from the EDCP, from NIH. Once you see the money, the next thing is, I'm not thinking about the study, it's just the money. So this is very bad because we have several cases in almost all fields of biomedical research. If you look at the literature today, we have some of them in orthopedics, some of them in clinical medicine, in neurology, several studies that come from industry that have low level of evidence, but more favorable outcomes. And these ones are comparable with publicly and foundation-funded studies that have less favorable outcomes, but have higher level of evidence. So why don't we talk about it? People don't understand what is conflict of interest. And because it's emotionally charged, somebody could get angry. Somebody could look at you and say, oh, are you suspecting that I am conflicted? And conflict of interest doesn't mean when you see a bad person, this researcher is bad, this professor is very strict. It doesn't mean that person is likely going to be conflicted in the research. Research is not about behavior. Conflict of interest is not about behavior. It's about the situation. But research misconduct is about your behavior. So when we talk about research misconduct, we are referring to behavior. When we talk about conflict of interest, we are referring to situation. So the same situation that fosters research misconduct also fosters research conflict of interest. The same money, fame, career advancement, tenureship, funders, pressure, peer pressure. These things could lead someone to having conflict of interest. So what do you do? Why is it important? It's important because from something that looks like a harmless or insignificant conflict of interest, it could lead you to fabrication, manipulation, plagiarism, and other questionable research practices. It could also affect how society makes use, benefits from your science. Like those in medicine, it could also affect how patients are being treated. It could make the society to be misled because of your erroneous finding. So it is important for us to know that this research conflict of interest should be managed, and it should be managed upfront. Three sets of individuals could be conflicted. An individual researcher could be, the institution, the whole institution could be conflicted. You see institution going for a study, and that is why you find out that some institutions are being blacklisted. So if someone is telling you to be very careful, he's watching your back so that you'll not be conflicted, it's not an enemy. It's helping you to prevent your institution from being blacklisted. There are some funders that wouldn't want any researcher from an institution to get a grant because that institution is known for research misconduct. Even the ethics committee or the scientific review committee could be conflicted, and the approaches are almost the same. What should you do if a researcher is conflicted? The first thing I want to say here, it's not a must that you should say yes to every call to study anything. You should not say yes. You are not planted to do every study. You can decide to reject it. Or if you think you'll be conflicted, what do? You hand over the research or that aspect to a senior colleague. Don't hand over to a junior colleague, because if you hand over to a junior researcher, you're likely going to come back and tell the junior researcher to still do what you want to avoid him or her doing. So that is what you should do as an individual. If it's an institution, you should have a policy, a clear policy, and you should have an independent. The emphasis here is having an independent conflict of interest committee, and then try to avoid, it's not every research funding that your institution should go for. It's not every call for research that you should go for. Sometimes you can reject it. I know it's difficult to reject studies that have big funds, associated with them. Then you should also disclose. It's easy to disclose. Tell them, sorry, I am part of the drug industry, the pharmaceutical that is funding this study. You could also choose another site than using your institution for that study. If it is ethics committee or scientific review committee, you could recuse from the decision-making process. And then you could also declare your interest that you are part of a study. So those who are in the ethics committees, they know what to do when they are completed in a study. So there are three approaches. Now we come to part 3 of this presentation. There are 3 major approaches to manage research misconduct and foster research integrity around the world. And I think that's one of the reasons why you are here. We have the rule-based corrective or punitive approach. The rule-based, someone blows a whistle, and the next thing, there's an investigation. Then at the end of the investigation, there's a conclusion, whether the allegation is false or is verified or valid. Then the next thing is the award, that's the punishment. So we have that as an approach. Some institutions use that rule-based approach. Then we have another approach called the virtue character preventive approach, and behavior modification. This approach focuses on providing a good environment and modifying the behavior of the researcher. It's more preventive than the one of punitive or curative. Then we have the common approach, which is a combination of rule-based and virtue-based approach. So for the rule-based approach, if you have a case of misconduct, what do you do? How do you manage that? Usually there's a whistleblower. I'll come to whistleblowing shortly. One is that in your institution, if you don't have a framework for whistleblowing, if you don't have a framework or a system for managing research misconduct, from experience, it's going to be difficult to manage a case of research misconduct. So we start from here. So when you leave this webinar, the next thing you ask yourself is, does your institution have on the website clearly and available to everybody a policy on managing research misconduct, or policy on research, or research ethics, or research integrity? And the second thing, that you should designate an office for that, and we'll have someone that is a research misconduct manager at your institution. Then there should be a way to systematically report cases of research misconduct and then to manage them. Now, for more information about this rule-based approach, you could look at the website that I'm showing you on the screen. I hope you can see my screen. From the Office of Research Integrity in the US, you have the misconduct cases. So they have several case summaries and videos that will help you if you want to practice or adopt the rule-based approach at your institution. But we also have the other approaches, like the virtue-based approach, the approach that focuses more on preventing research misconduct. You could look at some of these, what you see on the screen from the Embassy of Good Science, from the European Network of Research Integrity. There are so many approaches out there. Most of them are funded by the European Union Horizon 220 projects. If you go to the website from Europe, from France, you see that most of the approaches from those countries of what we call the virtue-based approach. The virtue-based approach strategically focuses on role modeling. We need to have role models. And if you don't have a role model in your institution, how would you follow? You have a good example. They focus on having a good research environment. And then we have some initiatives on responsible supervision. My students came up with the Research Integrity National Game, the first we designed was what we call the cage game, identifying a good research supervisor. We have those interested in the use of AI and data. We have those like Coara that is focusing on advancing research assessment. We have another initiative that the approach is looking at the quality of research during crisis or pandemics. Then, like I told you before, we have open science, reproducibility science. Now, let's go back to whistleblowing. I know you're interested in whistleblowing. Look at the small image there. You see someone that just blew a whistle that is research misconduct at his institution. What do you see next? You see backstabbing. It is very sensitive and something that we shouldn't discourage. We shouldn't discourage whistleblowing, but we should be very careful if the institution does not have a whistleblowing framework. In Nigeria, we have the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance, 2018. We also have the latest one of 2023. And in my country, and some people may say they don't have a whistleblowing policy at their institution, but we have a Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance, and every research institution should read this code. Nigeria has everything that you need to practice good research, including the code, apart from the code of health research ethics. We have the code of corporate governance. And then from the code, you look at the definition, disclosure by members of an organization of illegal, immoral, and illegitimate practice under the control of their employers to persons or organizations that may be able to effect action. And it's in principle 19 of the code of corporate governance in Nigeria in 2018, an effective whistleblowing framework for reporting any illegal or unethical behavior minimizes the company's exposure and prevents recurrence. So if you are looking at how to prevent recurrence of or illegal behavior at your institution, please have a copy of this code and implement the framework from the federal ministry, for the federal government of Nigeria at your institution. So, and some of you are very interested in how to protect those who blow whistle. You can only do that if there's a framework for reporting and a framework also that should protect wrong allegations. Some people will take whistleblowing as a personal vendetta. They just blow whistle because they don't want you to progress in your research. So the framework protects unlawful whistleblowing or fake whistleblowing and also protect those who are truthful whistleblowers. So we can look at the NRIO website to read more about whistleblowing protection. Now, towards the end of this presentation, I would like to ask you a question. What happens when research integrity fails? Just like what happens when research ethics fails? When research ethics fails, you are going to see harms, all kinds of harms, group harms, individual harms. The ultimate problem that you see when research integrity fails, and I'm sure that nobody wants it for anybody, irrespective of where you're coming from, is the mistrust of science. People will no longer trust science. Look at Retraction Watch. More than 57 retractions have happened. They have it in the database. And you see several image duplications that's so prevalent today. And as we keep having research integrity failing, and several institutions, big institutions in several countries of the world, you are likely going to see that people will continue or will increase in their mistrust of science. And now you see government coming up to cut funding for science. Is it new to you? Is it strange that the government could wake up one morning and say, hey, we will not fund this research anymore? So we should pay attention and put priority on research integrity more than the research itself. Also, when research integrity fails, what happens? Initially, we look at rankings, bibliometrics, the number of papers someone has, ranking of universities based on their research output, based on their grants, based on other metrics that have to do with research. But because of research integrity that is failing, and we have the increase in the research misconduct, these rankings are being flawed. Today, if you are still practicing publish or perish, you have people who go to get AI, who go to houses and buy articles, buy journals, buy publications, and then have AI right from chapter 1 of the paper, from introduction to references. Very wonderfully written papers by AI. So how are you going to rank those researchers? So that's why we are looking at how to advance research assessment. We're no longer looking at just publish or perish. So because research integrity is failing, our matrix system is also being flawed. So why do you think I'm worried about the failure of research integrity? Because there are many approaches that are not working in every environment. So what are we going to do? First, we need to harmonize. Why do we harmonize? Some tools or strategies that people are using at different institutions and countries may not work in certain research environments. Why do we harmonize? Why should we harmonize? Why should that be called for harmonizing approaches to research integrity globally? Because there are different weights or emphasis given to research. Some strategies may not be suitable with some institutions. Approaches that are suitable may be limited to research-specific institutions or career level. Fundings of strategies are not equitable across geographies. Why do we harmonize? Approaches may not be seen as adequate by international peers. The approach I'm using in my country, Nigeria, may not be adequately seen by any other approach that my peer is using in another country. So we need to harmonize. There are so many tools out there. Now, we need to harmonize because there are basics that we should have in every country and institution in the world. For example, every institution should have a policy on research integrity. Every institution should have an office. Every institution should have a research integrity officer or a REAL. These are basics. So we need to harmonize the requirements. And then we need to also see how networks from different countries could also harmonize their approaches. I'm interested in how we could harmonize the teaching of research integrity. If you look at 2007, the first World Conference on Research Integrity, I always see this place as the best in place to bring the harmony, the harmonization of approaches. The first World Conference was, brought about by the European and US science communities, just for a joint action and to harmonize policies. Now, the best place to start harmonizing is in teaching, educating people, communities, non-participants, participants on research. One of my papers was how we could do that among high school students. Now, we could do that using visual education tools. Another papers that we published, a preprint, suggests that there is need for us to come together and join forces. And also because there are context regional specific differences, we need to be more inclusive in our approaches in teaching research integrity. Finally, as we end this, I want to tell us that I'm so happy that there are many people coming up now, like Science Integrity Alliance, thinking about how to bring research integrity to young people, students, and then so we can harmonize these approaches, bringing cartoons like the Joker and bringing horrors and other things to help people to see research integrity. Now, integrity game is another way to harmonize, and we need to come together to play what we call a research integrity Olympic game. We have another integrity program coming up next year. We could play integrity games across campuses, across universities, across institutions. But the problem I have with integrity games now is that most of them don't have rewards. Most of them don't have rights or wrongs because they are ethics based. So we need to modify our integrity games in a way to create awareness, foster that awareness among young people. Now, integrity games that are out there, like we have the dilemma game, are very, very important way to teach research integrity among young people, and we can harmonize that. So global stakeholders to initiate a meeting. We need to have a meeting on harmonization. We need to have working groups to represent the different areas for harmonization. We need to emphasize on harmonizing basic approaches, and using a stepwise fashion, including advanced approaches. Then we need harmonizing research integrity or science integrity to be a United Nations agenda for equitable and sustainable results. Other ways is to include the government. Our government officials should not just come for opening and closing ceremony. Our government officials should not just come for cocktail and dinner parties. They should be part of the entire research process, integrity process, so that we won't have a government that will come up tomorrow and say we are stopping funding. we should involve our government, and so we should harmonize how we involve our government from different countries of the world. And we should make our tools open and tools context specific. So with this, I want to say thank you, and then possibly let's have a small video, then I'm open to questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I think your video goes on now. Our IT crew will put the video on. Okay, so while we're getting the video on, we can put our questions in the Q&A, and we'll start with my question. So can you answer my question? So I sat down listening to you, and my head was going in a swirl because I was seeing a lot of factors that can undermine research integrity for researchers. And I'm asking myself this question, which is the question I'm going to ask you. Is there a checklist that researchers can have, and they can, go through the checklist to ensure that they are maintaining their research integrity? Is there anything like that? Does it exist? Because there's a thin line for some of those factors. There's a thin line between doing right and doing wrong. Okay, so some researchers might actually be maligning the research integrity. In all honesty, very, very honest about it. But okay, so just think about that, and let's start your video.
Okay.
Yes, my name is Dr. Julius Godanike. I'm from Nigeria. I'm a public health physician. I'm also a lecturer. I teach. I'm a teacher. I love teaching. It's my passion. It's a calling. I'm a bioethicist, a research integrity professional and trainer, and I'm an artist. Thank you very much. It's not surprising that we have so many of them, or we have so many problems in science. Initially, we have just plagiarism. Most schools were interested in just plagiarism, how to detect plagiarism, spread plagiarism, falsification and fabrication. That was most of the emphasis there. Then later on, we started hearing about questionable research practices. And so we are also having projects and people interested in some of these things. I think the more people are interested in some aspects of research integrity, the more programs we have. Yeah, I foresee more programs, more research integrity programs, more networks coming up, because there are many issues coming up now, issues we didn't pay attention to, and we need to pay attention to them. And it's not going to be easy for one network or one project to handle all of them. So I think it's a good development, because people are going to be focusing specifically on aspects of research integrity. So I think it's good, but what we think is how we can harmonize all these programs and see that they could be used in many of the environments in the world. Thank you. I know you referred to the spooky professor, and again you referred to the ghost author. Recently, we had something about the choose a professor or cage experiment, the research integrity. You saw how the blinded students couldn't get a human or humane supervisor. She ended up getting a ghost or an invisible person who saw those. So we know that science is supposed to be fun, science is supposed to be positive, and that's what we project. But the history of science is clouded, shrouded, covered or somehow tainted with misdeeds, misbehaviors, or misconduct, or horrible behaviors of scientists. So we don't want people to forget that history. So that's why we bring some negative, or call it dystopian genre or literature in our narratives or discussions about science. So we use those ones, but we don't allow it to take over the entire length of our story when we talk about science. But science is good, but we have had people who have modeled very terrible, horrible behavior. So we let people know that this is really happened in the history of science. Okay, thank you. I know that you asked about the use of horror. So during the last World Conference on Integrity, I shared my experience with undergraduates, and I told them that research is fun. So we play games, and we're introducing the Research Integrity National Game, where people, they are just like an Olympic game. You know what Olympic game does? The Olympic spirit, bringing nations together, creating awareness of resilience and about resilience and strength. So we want to see how we could look for common games for children, and also caricature. Say caricature something and something fun. And so we want to use more of games and more of themes. We're not trying to make light of misconduct, but also want to let them know that science is good, science is positive, and if you get a result that you achieve something. So we tend to use games and small animations, cartoons, movies, and tell stories like stories by the hostel, and tell stories like tales by moonlight, tales, and usually we always end up with good character, hero, and villain, and hero is always winning the game. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you so much. Very interesting. So let's just jump to the questions. Can you answer mine? There's a lot of questions flooding the Q&A right now.
Thank you. Excellent. Yes, we have several tools. And when I code for Harmonized, there are several tools out there. And then there are tools for institutions, tools for research integrity officers of institutions, tools for researchers, like self-administered tools that when you look at, just like the polls, do you have this research you want to conduct? Is it based on your university or institute policy? So there are tools you can even adapt. There are tools out there, and I can also help you with the tools. We have several initiatives and networks, so there are tools, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So this first question is from one of the bioethics heavyweights in Nigeria, Professor Morenike Upong. Welcome, Ma. So she has a couple of questions for you. Professor Upong has a couple of questions for you. She says, is there a cultural context to the discussion on research integrity?
Excellent. Very, very interesting question. That is a cultural context. That was why I was advocating for harmony. Yes, for example, in Africa, we believe in collegiality. When in Athens last year, one of the speakers said something about Africa, that because we respect our seniors, that respect, Ubuntu, when we look at one another and we say we come together as a community, it is very difficult to want to blow whistle in an environment where you believe so much in communitarian spirit and where you so respect elders. So when you are looking at the kind of tool to use in Africa, you have to also look at the tool that the elders, the senior colleagues will look at a tool and say, this tool is also does not disrespect us. So we have cultural context. Not only that, research environments across the world is not equitable. We see that we have some institutions don't even have a good research portfolio. Some institutions don't even have research. They're not even conducting research. And so if you bring some tools from the EU or from US or from the UK, you can't do that in some institutions in some countries of the world. So we need to harmonize. We need to look at context specific and the kind of studies and the kind of environment we are. So there's a cultural context to research integrity.
Okay, there's another question. She says she agrees that there's a need to harmonize research integrity in Nigeria. And she's given information that there's a conference coming up soon and that she'll probably share that with us. But that she has a huge concern about the large number of undergraduates undertaking research unethically and breaching all the rules. And she thinks it's a big problem that action needs to be taken and because it's increasing their ability to japa. So when they have research and they have a track of research, then increases their the possibility of them getting visas and getting placements in universities abroad. So she just mentioned that. Thank you, Professor Morenike. Then I have a question from an attendee saying, what's the difference between research ethics and research integrity? Please.
Excellent question.
Clarify.
Yes, clarify. Yeah, ethics. Well, the easiest way to say to clarify the difference is that ethics looks at the protection of research participants. The participants, their rights, their safety, and their welfare. That's what ethics is looking at, basically. But research integrity is wider. It looks from the conceptualization of research to the publication, dissemination of that research. Inside it is also how you handle the environment. You remember when I was presenting something about environment, how you respect the environment, respect your participants. So in respecting the welfare, the rights of participants, that is the research ethics aspect. But you go from conceptualization, go beyond the respect of participants and caring for them to the publication, to the dissemination of results. That's research integrity. So we could say, some people may not agree that research integrity ethics is a subset of research integrity. So you have all of them together, but the research ethics is looking at how you care for the participants, the quality of the research vis-a-vis how you cared for the participants, how you respected them, and then how you protected their welfare, safety, and right. I don't know whether that clarifies.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so Damilola is saying that if you have a big research grant and you pay some people to do part of the work for you, like data collection, empirical review, data analysis, have you fallen short of research integrity in this regard?
Well, I can't say no or yes. It depends on what you wrote in your protocol or the grant agreement. And so if what you told, because this money is taxpayers' money, we pay for those things. This money belongs to individuals and the public. And so if you say you're going to have research assistants, and this is what they're going to do, and you're going to pay them for this, it's not wrong. But if you say you're going to be the only one that we conceptualize your research, that collect, manage, report data, only you, and then you go back and then you call some people, it's no longer the agreement. You are becoming insincere. You remember the definition of research integrity, transparent. Now, one way to answer the question is to ask you, suppose everyone is watching you. Suppose your research proceedings are transparent before the funders. Are they going to have issues with it? If the answer is yes, they will have issues with it, then there's something wrong with that.
Okay. So there are two questions that are similar on artificial intelligence. And that's really the buzzword now. So with the background of what happened in one of the American universities where the lecturers were walking out of the classrooms because they found out that the students were using AI for their assignments. So Brian and Alfred, they're asking, to what extent can AI determine the lack of research integrity? And are there research ethics that guide the adoption and deployment of AI in research?
Yes. We have several tools out there that are detecting the use of AI. Even Grammarly could tell you that this one will be detected. So we have several generative AIs that can also help to detect AIs. And the first thing that I would say concerning those who are working out from their students is, if the matter comes to me, I'm going to ask them, do you have a policy? If you have a policy, have you trained your students on we have the ethical use of AI. AI is not inherently bad. And so if you have taught your students on how to use AI and how not to use it, then you have the right to walk away. But when you don't create the environment, you don't have a policy, you don't train students on the use of AI, you don't have the moral justification to walk away from your students. When I was in the London school, before the exams, they sent us a checklist and guidelines on how to use AI in reporting our assignments and the trainings. So there are tools that research integrity experts are bringing out now, so many of them, that will detect when AI is used. Even Turnitin or authenticate. Yes, they are detecting AIs. But what I keep saying is that if you don't educate, if you don't train, don't build capacity, if you don't create the awareness, then you don't have the moral basis to walk away on your students.
Yes, sir. Yeah, thank you. So Mohammed is asking, how can a research integrity unit balance the act of ensuring responsible conduct of research and avoiding the tendency to be perceived as witch hunting? And should
Excellent.
research integrity unit be an independent unit to avoid undue influence by authorities?
Excellent question. You should have a policy. You don't just create a research integrity office without a policy. And the policy cannot be created without being formulated by the heads of the institution, by the board of the institution. So the policy determines what you do. If you come up with a research ethics or integrity program, and then you don't have a policy backing what you do. Like here at my institution, we have one of the viable ethics committees in Nigeria. We have a policy that the CEO of the teaching hospital, the area teaching hospital, approved. And so when a researcher comes to our ethics committee and says, hey, this is what you do, we tell the person it's according to our policy. We have a policy backed by the National Health Ethics Committee. So the first thing to do is to ensure that your institution approves your actions. And secondly, you should not be personal about it. No, like I said, it should not be personal. You should not have a personal angle to anything that has policy. The third one is that you should keep training. You yourself should train, and then the institution should also be training. Researchers should be trained to know that what you are doing, you don't have a personal vendetta. But can I say something? If you have a research integrity office that has a different agenda, and they could use it as a way to witch hunt researchers. So it's possible it happens, but you should base what you do on best practices and then liaise with networks of researchers and integrity globally to know what happens out there.
Okay, so this question is from Sylvia, who says, great presentation. How should an institution prevent the misuse of authority by research ethics or integrity offices from acts like favoritism, targeting certain researchers for selective investigations and delaying their work? Do you know of any such misuse of authority?
Yeah, it is possible. I kept saying framework, policy. You must have a policy. And like you asked the other question I missed, it is not possible to have a fully independent research integrity office or ethics office, but it should have members who are not affiliated with to the institution. You must have members. So who can decide something and they will not be afraid of the consequence. So one way to ensure that your research integrity office or ethics office does not become high-handed, become a watchdog or instrument, is to have members who are not subservient to you, who are independent of the research integrity office and the institution, who could look at you and say, sorry, you are becoming personalized and you are taking this in as a personal vendetta against people. Yes, you should not have every member of your integrity or ethics office affiliated to the institution or to your integrity office. By that way, you can balance that.
Okay, so this anonymous attendee says, where a researcher is unable to sign the consent forms from the research participants, but reported that the consent was obtained from all participants, where does that fall into?
Well, it has to do with one is one of the sloppy sciences. You need to be very careful. You need to be meticulous. So when you talk about integrity, quality. So that means that is carelessness. It does not mean that it is research misconduct. For it to be misconduct, it has to be investigated. It has to be intentionally done, recklessly done. But this is carelessness. Carelessness is not virtue. It is vice. So it shouldn't be encouraged. It should be frowned at. But that is not enough to just frown. You need to go back and read, because informed consent is not a one-time process. It's not one-time signature. Research, informed consent starts from the beginning of the research to the end of the research. So you should go back and reconsent those participants. By the time he's not able to consent those participants, then you may need to begin to suspect some kind of fraudulent behavior.
Okay, so someone says, speak more about misconduct in article authorship. That's very common.
Yeah, it's very common. What is more common is the ghost authorship. And then I would like to use that one. Coercive, gift authorship. Somebody comes in and says, sir, I put your name there because you have been so wonderful. You have been my supervisor all this while. Just like I'm talking to you, my supervisor is listening to me somewhere. So, and I said, sir, I also put your name there because I want you to become, that's gift authorship. Now, what is authorship? The person must have contributed significantly to that science. A different faculties or disciplines have the definition of authorship. But one thing that is common to all of them is significant contributions. And they have what is called significant contributions. So, but this professor, dean of faculty, head of department, senior colleague did not qualify for a significant contributor, but he felt like he has been so helpful. That grant, you got that grant, and they put his name as gift. And then when you tell a student or your junior colleague, you must publish that paper, you must publish that paper because I want to add it to the list of my publication because appraisal is coming. You must. And he said, sir, I don't have enough data. You must publish coercive. Then, but the one I want to end with because of time is ghost authorship. I acted a movie on ghost authorship. Is when you see a young student, now you recruited a young student to be a research assistant, young undergraduate, mostly undergraduates, that you carry all undergraduate papers and then you modify them, write manuscript from those studies, and you remove them, their names. It's okay, I just acknowledge them, they're just medical students or engineering students or art students. Then you acknowledge them, but they qualify for authorship. Then that means they have disappeared. That's disappearance. Ghost disappears. You saw the ghost there. So that's the ghost. Or suddenly you have done a study, a PhD student or master's degree, or even a junior colleague, independent researcher. And then someone says, I saw our publication, but our professor's name, our head of department's name is there. Excuse me, sir. Madam, when was he part of this study? No, I must put his name. He's a big guy. That's this big boy his name must be there. And that means he has appeared from nowhere. That's a ghost. And it's common. You remove some people's name and then you put some people's name. And so ghost authorship is common. I think these two may warrant for this explanation. Yeah. I know people don't like this one because it's common. Very common.
Yeah,
and so people may be angry at this
so,
one, yeah.
Okay. So the questions are done. I'm going to hand over to the director for the Ivan Research Institute, Professor Echezona Esanodwe, to have the last words.
Good evening, Prof.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. I knew I was going to learn a lot, so I was just listening. And of course, one thing that you have inspired all of us that are listening to this is how to create that environment. The last question was there, how do you create in that last environment so that you are not keeping the dog to watch the food, the bone that is there. So I'm usually one of those that say that you can't give the same people who are at risk of doing something the power to regulate it, because that's not done right. So most of the research integrity issues you raise are usually done by faculty members. So it is very difficult to have faculty member police themselves, because a lot of these things you talk about, whether it's ghost authors or they are all faculty members, they are all the PIs, they are all the investigators who make these things happen. And one of the things you talk about here is, even if you're trying to set up an institution that wants to set up a research integrity office or have a research integrity officer, which is something I really think that we are going to be adopting, because I like that idea. I do think that it's not an idea for faculty members to have, because faculty members need to be assessed and be looked at. You can't control yourself to say, I'm the PI, I'm the one who funded this study, but I'm going to police myself, just like we had on the news. When there's a conflict of interest, he will exclude himself. But the person that is going to exclude himself is the person who is the center of the conflict of interest, right? So you're giving authority to people who have, for me to say, I'm the PI, I will decide when there's a conflict of interest, and then I will report that. Which is the reason why, for our team, for example, we done at the beginning of every year, you have to report your financial conflict of interest. Because when you listed the reasons for all of those things, there is one thing that is common to all of them: money. Whether it's money, given, whether it's fame, all of them are tied back to money. So being able to disclose who funds your research, who, and who gives you money to go to conferences, who gives you money to go to meetings, those things are disclosed because they let people know. That's, again, core of what you said, transparency. I believe that if you follow the money, like they say, you will always do this. So if you have to do that, you have to be able to have people report about the funding, because that's how you're going to look what is potential. What I liked about what you're saying is that, conflicts of interest, it's not a bad thing that you have a conflict of interest. There is nothing wrong about it. If you're becoming successful in life, you're going to have conflict of interest. People are going to give you money, either in research or to go to meetings. That is what you do when you become successful. So, but it does develop conflict. What becomes problem is when there is no disclosure of that conflict of interest or that potential conflict, or when the person who is judging that is the same person who is at the center of that. So if I submit my financial conflict of interest, I wouldn't be the one reviewing it or reviewing other of my friends' own. There should be that officer that you have that also review that. So I really want to thank you for at least jumping a lot of us who are trying to do this environment about research the right way, and we are going to be looking at how to have a trained research officer in our integrity officer in our place. We have it on as policy right now, but to expand that beyond policy to say what are the policy we really need to in place, what are these breakdowns you're talking about, all these different aspects of integrity that you talked about. That is a little beyond just ethics of conducting research. So thank you so much. And I hope you continue to do this. I was excited, and I'm glad that I listened, and then I learned a lot from it. Thank you so much. I hope that you will come back. And I hope that you will come back to the Nigerian Implementation Science Alliance meeting in September, because it's a place that researchers gather around. And then it's important to talk about research integrity, because if you remove that, it becomes garbage in, garbage out. We can always tell the research to give us what we want it to give us, but once it lacks integrity. So thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you so much, Dr. K. And like Prof said, we're expecting your involvement in the NISA conference. And everyone, we have the Nigeria Implementation Science Alliance conference in September this year in Abuja, Nigeria. The flyers will be going out shortly so that you can save the date, you can send in your abstracts, and we hope to see you there. So thank you, sir. We know there's going to be a part 2. Your lecture this evening was fully loaded, overloaded, and we enjoyed it. So thank you so much for honoring our invitation. Thank you, everyone, for joining. See you next month. Bye-bye.
Bye.